Hi, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host, and this is a space and the place for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations on law, politics, culture, education, systemic racism, and current events shaping our world. We'll go beyond the headlines to dive deep into how some of our most pressing issues affect real people, real families, and our community. My goal is to help you navigate the complexities of our world. Each episode will tackle an issue, breaking it down in a way that's honest, informative, and actionable. We'll hear from community leaders, lawyers, activists, educators, healers, and everyday people on the front lines of change. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Pamela Price, a longtime attorney, political activist, and champion for justice. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. My guest today is Brian Hofer, the Executive Director of Secure Justice and the former chair of the City of Oakland's Privacy Advisory Commission. Brian is at the forefront of the battle to safeguard privacy and civil liberties in California. Brian has led the charge for surveillance reform at the municipal level in almost 100 jurisdictions across the country, helping to establish oversight committees and groundbreaking committees and ordinances. His notable achievements include the nation's first municipal facial recognition ban and a ban on predictive policing analytics, helping to create multiple privacy commissions, authoring the nation's first sanctuary contracting ordinance, and pioneering initiatives to restrict the use of invasive surveillance, including police technology. Brian's expertise has earned him recognition from across the country, including the prestigious Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award. A sought after speaker and consultant, Brian shares his insights at prestigious conferences and universities, and he regularly testifies before government bodies at the state and local level, amplifying the importance of digital rights and privacy. Through Secure Justice, he continues to advocate for a future where privacy and civil liberties are protected for all. Brian, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Happy to be here.
Yes, we are glad to have you in this time. It's a critical moment for our country and for our city and for our state. Our privacy rights are under attack nationally, we know, as well as locally. And you have been at the forefront. So thank you for that, for protecting our rights to privacy, which is embodied in the First Amendment of the Constitution, as well as the California Constitution. So you've been instrumental in passing surveillance reform policies nationwide. Tell my audience about Secure Justice and what first motivated you to take on this fight for privacy and civil liberties.
Yeah, happy to. I was, really just kind of paying attention to Occupy Oakland back in 2012, 2011, and the Urban Shield protests. Just, kind of working around city centers, staring at these kids camped out on the lawn and didn't really quite understand what was going on. In June of 2013, some unknown contractor named Edward Snowden suddenly hit the front pages and revealed that all this mass surveillance was happening domestically by American intelligence agencies. And 2 weeks later, the city of Oakland introduced an item on the consent calendar, which is supposed to be for routine, non-controversial matters, $12 million real-time crime center proposal. They had no use policy, no privacy guardrails in place at the time. It's pretty much the Wild West. And even then, they were talking, back then, they were talking about using facial recognition and commingling all this data. I had literally never been inside Oakland City Hall in my life at that point, and I just walked in the door, shared some concerns about this project, and kind of ended up becoming the spear point of this coalition that really scored a major victory. We generated international news in our very first effort because people don't usually win these types of projects, especially when you start, kind of behind. They were already building the project by the time I showed up, but we got a temporary privacy commission out of it. And in our second meeting, we realize there's always going to be new and emerging technologies. Like it's just always going to, be advancing, more features, more invasive, more data mining. And so we realized we needed a standing body. And that's what we did. We convinced the city council to create the very first privacy advisory commission in the country, possibly the world, where residents that have subject matter expertise, relevant expertise, but regular folks like myself could have a voice in making the rules around how we're going to use these technologies in alignment with our community norms.
Outstanding. And you became the chair of the Privacy Advisory Commission. So thank you for your service because it did a great service for all of us. Oakland led the country in banning facial recognition and predictive policing. So, can you talk about what those tools are and why they are so dangerous to everyday citizens?
Yeah. I'm going to start off with predictive policing analytics first, because unfortunately it's very much in vogue right now. As a number of municipalities have financial problems, surveillance vendors are really pushing the use of analytics and technology as they use lingo like force multiplier. We're also being told that if we just eliminate humans, biased humans from the process, that we're going to cure racism. And what these vendors won't tell you is that it is impossible because his predictive analytics rely on historical data. You
Right.
can't unwind, you can't unring the bell. So in a city like Oakland, that is about to enter into its, shameful 23rd year of federal oversight due to racial bias, um, systemic racist policing practices, uh, our data does show that we have disproportionately impacted primarily Black folks in Oakland, that we enforce certain crimes selectively against certain communities more than others. And so when you take that skewed data and feed it back into your model, of course it's going to predict that Black people commit crimes because that's what we've been enforcing. It hasn't been enforced, equitably. Um, and so there's this feedback loop that just really reinforces all the problems that America is unfortunately well known for with our racist history. And so we were able to get out in front of that and stop it before it was even being used. And there were a couple other cities that joined us. Unfortunately, they've since been repealed, the bans. So Oakland is standing alone on this. Facial recognition, again, it caught fire. Everybody likes the shiny new gadget. It sounds sexy, it sounds innovative. And, some of us, most of us have been subject to facial recognition when you go to the DMV to get your driver's license, or now maybe at airports when you're doing the TSA checkpoint. But it is a night and day difference when you are standing still at a perfect distance under perfect lighting against the background giving your driver's license photo, compared to how the police want to use it in real time or in fast acting situations. I have seen so many photos of the grainy footage, or it's dark, the lighting, you can't see who it is, and they're trying to get matches out of these. Just this past weekend, I was with Robert Williams at the Innocence Network conference. We were presenting on a panel about surveillance, AI use in surveillance. He was the first known unlawful arrest due to facial recognition. He was in Detroit. He was accused of retail theft. He was arrested in front of his children. He was locked up in jail, and he had to sue, for damages for the violation of his civil rights. And he showed me, Pam, I looked at the photo of what they compared it to the man himself. It wasn't even close. Like you had to be blind to think that was the same person, and they put him in jail. And he's not the only one. There's been at least, I think, 8 or 9 now proven false arrests. 8 of them are against Black people. There was one white man. The rest were all Black. And this is what we had been saying, is that we've known through all the academic testing, through all the research, that it doesn't work well with darker skin tones. And
Mhm.
yet people want to push this out into the wild before they understand the technology. And so this is what we've really tried to do with these oversight bodies, is rather than just release things out into the wild and then try to fix them later, we're trying to stop and slow it down and think first about how we might use this, if we even should use this.
Well, we've been told that, and you hear it in the public debate at city council, that surveillance makes us safer. How do you respond to that argument, especially in cities like Oakland, where residents are just overwhelmed with media hysteria about public safety and the fear that has we've been all subjected to over the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, with my mouth, the first thing I say is surveillance isn't safety. It's not making us safe, and in my calmer moments when I, get into the weeds on these conversations, I first always just say, I try to put the ball back into the court of those proponents. Prove it. Can you actually prove that this technology is helping? Because I can show you a whole list of horror stories where it hasn't worked, that we're either violating civil rights and it leading to very expensive lawsuits, which draw away resources from other city services. They cause trauma in the community, they cause distrust in the community, but also just they don't work at reducing like violent crimes, predicting active shooters, lone wolf things. Like surveillance has just never been good at that. We looked at even, just CCTV cameras. We've had cameras for decades, and most people don't, object to those. We're pretty used to them now. But study after study from a statistical analysis has shown that at best, it might displace crime. It moves around the corner, but it doesn't reduce it on net.
Mhm.
Now, am I going to make the argument that there's never been any investigative use? No, of course. There have been some successes. We've seen some crimes that have been caught on camera, and you use it to prosecute a violent crime afterwards. We understand that. But like policing itself, that's reactive. People want to keep saying that if we just put cameras everywhere, we're going to have a deterrent effect. And if we have license plate readers tracking everybody, it's going to stop, the smash and grabs. And it's like, but it's not happening. We've had license plate readers since the late 70s. We've had CCTV networks all over. We've got thousands of cameras, and it really isn't having that positive impact. And so what we try to do in these frameworks where we're doing a cost benefit analysis is, maybe we can redirect this towards some sort of alternative, a different form of policing, community policing, intervention, violence interruption, civilian responders to mental health crises. It's, maybe let's look for other ways that might be not only just more cost effective, but also less harmful from a civil rights perspective.
Right. Certainly, Oakland is a case study in why it doesn't keep us safe, right? I mean, I recall the governor Newsom demanding, that Oakland put cameras everywhere. And that was years ago, and it hasn't kept us safe. It didn't stop the rising crime in Oakland in 2023 or 2022 or any part of it, right? So you've worked in other communities across the country. What are there patterns or tactics that you see repeated in other jurisdictions when it comes to surveillance? And how do communities push back against, investing in something that clearly doesn't make us safer?
Yeah, I think that we're remarkably similar. California alone has 8 cities or 8 jurisdictions, including BART, a transit district, that are under the similar surveillance technology framework. And the community justification for the oversight has been the same. We want to protect our public privacy. We want to protect our civil liberties. And the opposition has also always been the same. First off, it's an administrative burden, or it's anti-innovation. If we have too much transparency, the bad guys are going to get all the way, and how to figure out how to escape, and we're all going to die of murder. The sky is falling. I hear these same things over and over. Kind of piggybacking on your previous comment, San Francisco, former Mayor Breed was out there, Governor Newsom was out there, the Attorney Generals, the federal task forces dealing with the Tenderloin. They're all saying that San Francisco is one of the most lawless, violent places, in the country, the doom loop narrative. Well, your police department by itself had over 48 different pieces of surveillance technology. You've also got the local Federal Fusion Center in Nickrick, which also has its own surveillance technology. You've got the FBI. You've got the Sheriff's Department with its own surveillance technology. You had the Highway Patrol and all these task forces. So if surveillance technology was keeping us safe, then why was San Francisco so dangerous and violent? They always want to take the credit when there's a crime drop in the statistics that are being reported. But when there's a huge uptick, they suddenly say their only response is really, well, we need more of it. We need more surveillance tech. We need more money. We need more law enforcement, more incarceration.
Right.
That's always the response. And they're just afraid to try something different.
Or we need a new DA. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well,
It must be her fault.
yeah. And again, it's, because you were trying something different. And I, we can get into that conversation as well separately, but like you look at what California just did with Prop 36, that we've created all these new retail theft task forces. We voted for Prop 36 as a state to really increase mass incarceration again. And at the federal level, the Lake and Riley Act happened, which not only expanded the definition of crime for deportable offenses for undocumented folks, it also took away due process rights. The mere allegation of something like petty theft can now get somebody deported. So California wants to claim to be a sanctuary state. Alameda County, City of Oakland, we all want to claim to be sanctuary, but we collectively just voted for this thing that is now putting more immigrants at risk of getting deported. We did that, the voters. And people just aren't connecting these dots that by creating these big surveillance networks, these big ecosystems, we built the infrastructure for Donald Trump to do what he's going to do.
Right. Right. I mean, you recently wrote a piece about titled The Purple Haze, talking about the shift in how people vote and what's happening in Sacramento and how that's completely inconsistent with, what we say our values are, particularly for the Democratic Party, what we say our values are. And yet we're doing things that are not consistent with what we put on paper, right? We're creating new roadblocks and pitfalls for people for real. So how do police unions, and you touched on the tech companies that are benefiting from this, and how do the police unions though, how do they play into influencing this debate?
I think they're influencing this a couple of ways. I think one, just like the rest of us humans, we are susceptible to, what I call the shiny new object, shiny new gadget. Like we all want, a new iPhone comes out, oh, I gotta have it. I want to be the early adopter of some new technology. I just think generally as all humans, we're just susceptible to the allure, the promises of what this new tech can do. Even though
Mhm.
we've repeatedly been disappointed by it, we're still susceptible. And another part of it is, I don't know when this shift exactly happened, but, especially like in Oakland, it's always frustrating. It's like, why don't the police ever get out of their cars? Why don't they ever walk a beat? Policing today is like sitting at a desk, staring at a monitor, clicking buttons. It's data mining. And
Mhm.
that has been a dramatic shift in the way that the police engage with the community and really, I think, led to this additional explosion of surveillance technology that, it is hard to solve crimes. In my opinion, I think it's even harder when you don't have a relationship with the community and you're sitting behind
Always.
your desk. I think that's one reason, at one point, both San Francisco and Oakland, we had like the first and second lowest clearance rates in California for a number of violent crimes. We didn't solve violent crime,
Right.
and then, yeah, people go out and blame the district attorney. It's like, well, the case never even got to my desk. What was I
Right.
going to do?
Right.
And I don't understand doubling down on this strategy when it's not working. But there is some of this. I think it's really a reluctance to do the hard work that is legitimate policing. It's hard. It's
Hmm.
not supposed to be easy. That's why we have guardrails put in place and due process and things so
Right.
that innocent people don't get tripped up. But now policing has just kind of become click a button and let the algorithm do it for you.
So, Brian, with the rise of AI and increasingly invasive technology, what should everyday people, especially those in communities of color, be most aware of or concerned about right now?
Yeah, that's the question of the moment. And, my answer is probably going to be out of date by the time I finish giving it. It's moving so fast. Groups like mine, Secure Justice and others, we're hosting a series of privacy self-defense workshops where we're going to teach people how to use better privacy products, to use encrypted text messaging or calling apps, to use different browsers that'll hide your clicks and keyword searches so that you're not giving up all this data to people that might, trying to harm you one day. There are thankfully a number of good data privacy bills that have been introduced at the state level this year. California isn't just a sanctuary state when it comes to undocumented, but also LGBTQ, folks seeking reproductive or gender affirming care. I can tell you, I have seen firsthand subpoenas from out of state attorney generals and others that are trying to get our data to prosecute their own residents that come to California for these services. It's weird as a data privacy advocate. Like I'm grateful to have the ear of people finally that are listening, but of course, it's for a bad reason. The state of the world we're in right now, where people understand what's at risk. We have a history, not just in this country, here in the Bay. Japanese internment. We turned over government data, census data, to enter our neighbors, even right here in the city of Oakland. I've saved some of those photos from the bus stops where we were rounding up Oaklanders to send them away. We just saw recently the IRS is going to turn over data on immigrants that have been paying taxes. That's one of the things a lot of people don't understand is that actually, yes, undocumented folks do pay taxes. They don't get them back, they don't get any benefits, but they do actually contribute to the tax base. And now all that data is going to be turned over. The state of California, we created a special driver's license under the AB 60 to help undocumented folks get insurance and not be afraid to drive to work. And it's a great public policy. Nobody listened to the data privacy people. ICE had a direct pipeline to the DMV database, and they did use those AB 60 profiles to deport people. So we're finally getting everybody to start realize like we got to go slow and fast. We've got to be thoughtful. Like right now, so many people are trying to introduce new bills, but they sometimes have unintended consequences, like AB 60. We need to make sure that we're not creating loopholes or exceptions that allow this data to get into the hands of the Trump administration that are going to put people at risk. And it's not just undocumented or, trans individuals, the entire war on DEI. You've seen how fast corporate America has backtracked and just caved on that. Uh, Oakland has a Department of Race and Equity, Alameda County. We hand out a lot of grant money to try to make things more equitable. And I think a lot of that data is going to be searched for and demanded. We've already seen at the university level nationally where they've been requesting a lot of this data. The Trump administration just hit the UC, University of California, and is demanding DEI information. So, when the data folks come around and say, hey, we need to start deleting things or shortening our retention periods, don't look at us like we're conspiracy theorists. Like this is the real world that we live in today, and we've got to take it serious.
Right. It's about protecting real people's lives and real families, folks who have done nothing wrong, people who were brought here perhaps as children or people who came here and just were not able to get their paperwork through. Minor offenses, we did a lot, and I know you've worked in collaboration with our public defender's office to try to address the past convictions and the consequences of criminal convictions. So it's it's all connected. And so the work that you're doing is so important and protective. You mentioned quickly passing legislation. The Laken Riley Act is so devastating and so damaging. And it was just passed just literally overnight, moved so quickly. And the unintended consequences, or perhaps the intended consequences in many ways, but for those who thought that it was, important to support that. So again, keeping our legislators on their toes is another thing that you do, and we appreciate the effort that you make. As tiring as that may be, it is certainly important to have somebody in the trenches understanding the details, that the devil is in the details, and these folks are writing laws and they couldn't do it effectively without you. So thank you. One of the things that we've looked at and all of us are aware of is the national invasion of our data, which you've talked about. And how can folks on the local level in their everyday lives, what can they do to keep their data secure? Because we know often the government might fail us.
Yeah. I am in this strange position where I'm out there saying, don't put your personal safety into the hands of the government because of these known concerns, but also at the same time trying to work with especially our local governments to really tighten things up and to ensure that we do have safeguards in place. People can go to the Secure Justice website and look at our resource material and our future events that will be updated as we hold additional workshops to learn how to secure your communications. Easy practices right now: stop clicking accept all cookies. It only takes 2 seconds to hit the reject button. Uh, California, thankfully, at least on the consumer privacy side, has made a lot of great progress as to privacy. You can delete your data. Data brokers have to delete your profiles now if you request it. We're teaching people how to take advantage of that law as well. Um, just simple little practices, that might take a little time, might inconvenience you, but it makes a world of difference between how much data you give off. Stop signing up for every $5 Starbucks gift card because you're really just turning over all your data
Right. Giving people your
for
email
that.
seems so
If they're giving you
simple.
$5 for it,
Yeah. But look at what they do with it.
yeah, exactly. You subscribe to everything and
Yeah.
just realize, if they're giving you $5, they're making more than that off of you for that
Right.
data.
Exactly.
So it's really, privacy is a practice. You just,
Mm.
you got to start to get that muscle memory into place.
Oh, I like that. Privacy is a practice, folks. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Well, let's talk briefly about a situation where the government didn't think much about privacy, where the Department of Defense is having a conference call and using signal and unencrypted channels to plan an attack, an international act of war. What do you think about that? I mean, what in the world is happening, and why should anybody trust Signal at this point?
Well, I mean, the good news is that the signal protocol is intact. You know, and then let me just say two things. If your phone has been compromised, you've clicked on a phishing link, some cybersecurity hacker already got into you and installed malware, then no application is going to be secure on your phone. But if you've got a clean phone and you've installed Signal, your communications are encrypted. Signal, when Hegseth and Secretary Hegseth and these other guys were, one, they're adding third parties, whether it's intentional or unintentional. They violated multiple federal policies and regulations. They were never supposed to be using that app for that purpose.
Right.
And, to create a group text of war plans with journalists, I mean, these guys have made so many mistakes between the first administration and this one, just incompetence. You're just like, how does this keep happening? It's just, that's the crew they run with. But Signal itself, the protocol is strong. It's superior to WhatsApp, Telegram, anything else that's out there. They're essentially a zero knowledge company. They don't have to dodge subpoenas because they don't have anything to turn over.
All right, then. Well, on that note, tell us a little more about the conference that you're sponsoring this weekend and on the ongoing basis. But your focus initially is privacy and immigration. Is that right?
Yeah, April 12th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is the first in a statewide series of immigration, know your rights, and privacy self-defense workshops. So we're going to do sort of overall training. ICE shows up at your door. What do you do? ICE comes to your workplace, especially right now with all the travel concerns, even for, birthright citizens. Phones are getting searched at the border. What do you do? We're telling people you should have a backup phone, or, delete your apps when you go across the border so there's nothing for them to search. We're going to be teaching things like that at these workshops. We're going to teach folks how to use certain browsers or VPNs, different apps, so that when you communicate data, it's only going between you and the intended person because it's fully encrypted, using encrypted email. Most of the products we use today, because they're free, are data mining. They're harvesting us. Facebook, anything by Google, including Gmail. Have they, incrementally made pro-privacy moves over the years because of public pressure? Yes, but none of those are like the gold standard. You shouldn't be relying on these basic consumer products.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have an events page at the securejustice.org website, and people can pay attention to it. We are going to San Francisco in June for the next event. Then maybe we'll see San Jose, or we might come back up to the East Bay. But if folks pay attention to our events page, they can stay in tune. They can sign up to our newsletter to be alerted when we have more workshops.
All right, then. On that note, thank you so much, Brian Hofer, for your time, for your service, for your contribution to protecting our democracy, protecting our privacy and our civil liberties. Those are such valuable contributions in the age of Trump and the days ahead. I'm sure we will all be needing and learning more from you. So thank you so much for coming to talk with us. I'm Pamela Price Unfiltered.
I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for all the work you've done over the years.
All right. Take care. Welcome to Legally Speaking. April is Second Chance Month, established by federal legislation as well as state legislation and acknowledged in many communities. Second Chance Month is the time when we recognize that people who have served their time or may be serving time may deserve a second chance. For at least the last decade, we can go back to 2016 when California passed Proposition 57, and 77% of the people in my county, Alameda County, voted in favor of Proposition 57 to stop district attorneys from charging juveniles as adults. In 2017, the California legislature passed SB 180 and SB 620 to eliminate drug sentence enhancements. As we've talked previously on this program, California law, the penal code, has hundreds of enhancements. And our legislature has been busy for the last 10 years trying to curb the use of those enhancements. In 2018, the legislature passed SB 1393 to eliminate 5-year prior prison enhancements. In 2019, the legislature passed SB 136, again to eliminate 3-year prior prison enhancements. In 2020, the legislature passed AB 2542, the landmark Racial Justice Act, which opened the door for resentencing for anyone who had been charged, arrested, convicted, or sentenced in a manner that was rife with racism. We know that in Alameda County, we have a long history of sentencing rife with racism. The UCLA Center for the Study of Women found that 82% of the sentences given from Alameda County were given to young people who received life without the possibility of parole sentences before they had reached the age of 21. In 2021, AB 333 eliminated gang sentence enhancements. In 2021, also, SB 567 established a midterm presumption for sentences, which impacted people who did not receive the benefit of that law. In 2021, California legislature also passed SB 81, which we've noted was sponsored by our Alameda County Senator Nancy Skinner. So, reviewing that, in 2022, SB 483 made many of the laws retroactive, particularly sentences that were vulnerable to allegations of racism under the Racial Justice Act. So, who can actually initiate a resentencing? CDCR has the power to do it. The sheriff of every county has the power to do it, the Board of Prison Terms, and the district attorney of every county. Who is eligible? Virtually anyone who is incarcerated in California is eligible for resentencing. It just depends on the policies and the practices under the particular district attorney. There are mandatory resentencing, but resentencing can include LWOP or death sentences. Again, our LWOP statistics appear to be rife with racism, making it possible for anyone who received that sentence to file a petition to be resentenced. The individual persons who are incarcerated can file petitions for resentencing. And again, some resentencing, some sentences are it is mandatory that those sentences be revisited and removed by the court. So what types of sentences are being set aside in California? Again, the 3-year prior drug-related enhancement, a 1-year enhancement for a prior felony that resulted in a prison or a jail sentence, and 5-year prior prison term enhancements are now illegal and must be reviewed and removed. Some gang enhancements, including alternative sentences for gang-motivated witness dissuasion, gun enhancements, great bodily injury enhancements, child pornography possession charges, and consecutive in-prison felony terms are all subject to resentencing under the various laws. CDCR is the only agency statewide that has developed an internal system to process petitions for resentencing. They are now before the courts and district attorney's offices. Each district attorney's office has the discretion to set his or her own policies. We created in Alameda County a set of policies for resentencing, a resentencing team to either initiate resentencing or respond to resentencing petitions. And most importantly, we created a reentry team that work together with the resentencing process, because we realize that if we're going to be resentencing people, we need to make sure that we're bringing them home safely, and we better protect public safety. Thanks for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show, and to my Substack to get the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to Pamela Price Unfiltered wherever you get your podcast.